It's so hot.
In fact, you sold more tickets than this, I can tell you. Someone is obviously still in Hyde Park. Sunning themselves. Listen, if it is really hot like this, you can, for £5, come in here. It's very cool. Even if you want to snooze, okay? But who is here for the first time? Can I just ask? Well, this is best kept secret in London. £5, £10, you come and listen. And we've got lots of programs. We have Michael came tomorrow, and then we sort of shut down for the summer. But starting in September, we've got, on September 1, Barry Humphries. And then on September 6th, we've got a thing called Battle of the Noodles. So I'm going to come along with Ken Hong, the great cook, and espouse the proposition that we, the Chinese, introduce noodles to Italy, and A.A. Gill and Locatelli are going to come and tell us that we're talking nonsense, and it was pasta, which Michael would have brought to China. And there will be a demonstration, so that will be very amusing. And then actually, later on in the year, we've got Joanna Lovely and so forth. Look at the list. But thank you for coming. And the format is very simple. I have a slight conversation with my guest, and then they can say whatever they want. They don't have to say anything they don't want. And then I'd like to encourage you, the audience, to ask questions. That's the whole point of this forum, to open the general public interaction, opportunity to interact with our speakers. But they've got to be very intelligent questions. We don't want a stupid question. Tessa, you have been in the Labour Party for a long time, and in the centre of it. When Blair came blazing into power, you were at the centre of it, and for years you were Secretary, you were Minister of State for so many departments, all the key departments, health, education, environment, culture. Excuse me. First of all, which was the most difficult department that you found, and which was the most enjoyable, and were they the same?
What an interesting question. I was never a minister in the Department for Environment, but I was a minister in the Department for Health, where when we won the election in 1997, I was the first Minister for Public Health. Then there I focused very specifically on health inequality, which was really on the march, still is, and focused on how you prevent deaths, avoidable deaths from cancer and from heart disease. And within about 3 years, I think about 170,000 fewer people were dying from what were preventable heart diseases.
What was the secret? What did you institute in those 3 years that prevented 185,000 deaths?
Well, two things. One was a laser-like focus. The great temptation when you go into government is to think you can do everything, and you can't. If you're a minister, you really can't have any more than 3 priorities. And you then need to shape the department so the department understands that those are your priorities. And in reducing deaths from heart disease and cancer, you have to do probably 100 things in order to reduce that. It's exactly the same in any public health intervention. But the second thing that I did, and I wanted just to answer your question, was that I set up Sure Start while I was a minister, which was the first ever early nurture program to support mothers and their new babies. And it became a sort of national byword for good childcare. I wish it had been more early nurture than childcare, but that was how it developed. And then the most difficult thing I think I did was at the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, where I had to sort of unravel a number of things that had gone wrong, particularly sorting out the commissioning of Wembley Stadium as a national football stadium. That was very difficult. Redrawing the rules for cross-media ownership, which I did when I was Secretary of State at the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. That was very difficult.
You stopped BBC Three.
I paused BBC Three and said, bring back a better proposition, which they did. But it was still not quite good enough to fly as a main sort of terrestrial channel. And now it is online.
But for Wembley, that was the usual construction cock-up, right? Was it to do with the government?
No, it was because what I learned from Wembley was very important preparation for initiating and then overseeing the Olympics, which is if you're setting up a big project like that, you've got to be very clear who's going to pay for it and whose responsibility it is. And that had become hopelessly confused. And it had become hopelessly confused because there were too many people in number 10 who would just basically roll over if the FA asked anything of them. And so these lines of responsibility had to be redrawn. And as I had to
That's
say...
the Football Association.
Football Association and government. This was the National Football Stadium. It wasn't...
Was it paid for by the government?
A small amount, well, quite a large amount by that stage being paid for by the government and the lottery. And I said, the government's not going to pay any more towards this.
In fact, it went over budget by £600 million.
The Football Association really wanted a national football stadium. And as I had to say in a pretty evil negotiating meeting in the middle of the night to the then Chief Executive of the Football Association, what you've got to understand is that we've got to have clarity here about what the government will do and what the Football Association will do. And you have to understand that you have a Secretary of State now who doesn't give an FUCK whether we have a national football stadium or not. If you want it, you're going to pay for it. And then, that was a kind of low budget, that's kind of retrofitted wisdom, but it was a low blood sugar moment. And
it was
so,
you at your toughest.
Yeah, and after that, what the government paid for was the kind of infrastructure that enabled people to get to Wembley and from Wembley. And it was, again, it was very good training, if you like, for overseeing the commissioning of contracts for the Olympic Park, because what these contractors do is you're nearly there, you're just about to buy your stadium and they say, well, we'd like another 50 million just to be sure. And, or you're about to seal the deal on the aquatics centre, beautiful, and the contractor comes and says, we'd like 15 million more. So
I know, but it's always the contractors. I mean, here, originally it was going to cost £2 million, and it ended up £4 million. But they have an unquenchable thirst. I think there ought to be a department specifically monitoring the evil doings of contractors.
Or you just have to say no to them.
Well, then you wouldn't be sitting here. Then you wouldn't be sitting here.
I'm not so sure. The contractors, is this all Chatham House, by the way?
Yes,
Yes.
nobody's
Okay,
going to do
right.
this.
So,
I mean, there might be spies, but look,
yes,
listen, will you be nice?
okay,
I mean, it's very tight that we can't.
No, but what I wanted to say is that when we were about to sign off the contract,
But to be safest, if you don't want anybody to repeat you, don't say it.
No,
you
no.
can tell me and then I can repeat it.
No.
And I will say
What we were about to sign off the contract for the Olympic Stadium, where the biggest enemy was not contractors telling you they wanted more money, but time, because every week that went by put the completion date in jeopardy. And but about 3 weeks before we were signing off the final contract for the Olympic Stadium, I was told that they wanted certainly another 25 million more, maybe another 50 million for contingency, just in case. And I said, no, we're going to buy a stadium for 498 million, not for 524 million, and certainly not for 554 million. Well, it's very difficult, Secretary of State, you know, there are a lot of risks in this. I said, no, we're going to do it. And I don't know quite where I got the determination from to say.
It was you who signed off the
yes, on advice from the Olympic Delivery Authority,
who were
on public, and it came up, the stadium came in under budget, 484 million.
When did Boris Johnson come into this process?
He became mayor in 2004.
And,
when he beat Ken Livingstone, and then he was really
2008.
2008. He was. No, I'm so sorry. You're quite right. You're quite right. I'm just making sure everyone was paying attention. He was elected in 2008. I ran his campaign, David Ken Livingstone's campaign. How could I forget? So he was elected in 2008, Boris Johnson, and we were well into the Olympics by then. And then you're absolutely right. Thank you very much. He was re-elected in 2012.
Was he helpful? Was he?
Well, he was a bit like, when he first arrived, he was a bit like the cuckoo in the nest, and there was an Olympic team who were already bonded to each other with a tremendous sense of loyalty. And Boris came in and kind of wanted to kick the table over and say, well, had I been here from the outset, it would all have been done much better, and we've got to save costs and all the rest of it. So I took the view that he was entitled to do this, that we knew the costs had all been squeezed.
But who was the real boss? I mean, at the time you had Ken Livingstone as being mayor, then you as Secretary of State for Culture, and then subsequently as Boris Johnson. But who was the real boss?
Well, in government, I was for the government, the person with whom the buck stopped, and government signed unlimited guarantees to underpin both the spending by
So what was the position and power of the mayor?
Well, the mayor had considerable contractual and constitutional power, because it is the mayor in an Olympics who holds what's called the host city contract. But the host city contract is underpinned by an unlimited guarantee that the government has to sign in order that you can...
But you just told us that you said no more than 498, so he couldn't have gone beyond that. And yet you're saying that there is a limited guarantee.
No, because we were doing all the regeneration of the Olympic Park. There was a division of responsibility, and this is where the governance looks completely dysfunctional. You have an organising committee that is chaired by SEMCO, which is a private company, and their job is to raise money from sponsors to pay for, if you like, the entertainment. The government's job is to guarantee security, the regeneration of the park, the budget for the regeneration, and then the mayor's job is to ensure the city works throughout the games and to collaborate with the government to maximise the broader benefits. So that's
but Boris went around banging about regeneration afterwards.
He probably did. He went banging on about a whole load of stuff.
I think he would be a very good foreign secretary.
Do I think he'll be a very good? I think.
He just started today.
Well, I think I have to say I like Boris. And there were many moments during the Olympics where he was a huge, really important ally, because he got the point of democracy. Do I think he'll be a good foreign secretary? I think he's got a lot of ground to make up, particularly having led the Brexit. I believe that it was Boris that won the Brexit campaign. I don't believe, but you can invite him along and ask him whether
he will come, I'm sure.
I don't believe that was the view actually that he held. I think he's a classic Remainer.
Well, put it this way, let's forget about that for the moment, but in front of us, here it is, the new Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, and a lot of people say that he's not a serious politician, he's not a serious character, because he goes on swings and he dresses up funny and so forth. Now, there were 2 or 3 very pompous people who go on the television regarding this sort of behaviour as not serious. But, I mean, have they not watched Question Time and the way in which Parliament behaved? I mean, surely a Martian might have thought that Question Time would make the Prime Minister and the leader of opposition rather comical and so forth. So I don't understand why people keep on saying that Boris has got to settle down and be a bit more serious. I mean, do you agree with that?
Well, no, I'll tell you why. Because Boris has said in his time some things which are deeply offensive to countries which are important allies, deeply offensive to people who live in this country.
But
Now,
he gets
well, I mean, do you think talking, we're one of the most, fabulous and diverse cities in the world. Do you think talking about pickaninnies with watermelon smiles is likely to make African leaders feel comfortable with him and so forth? I think that was deeply offensive.
Well, I mean, that's one view. I mean, the other view is that people are fed up with the way in which politicians are disingenuous.
I want to answer this question, properly, because it's an important question you've asked. I think, Boris is very clever, has a huge frame of reference. At City Hall, he did not have a reputation for a great eye for detail. If you're Foreign Secretary, you have to read the papers very carefully before you go into a meeting with your counterpart.
You're right. He
from
is
Spain.
shameful.
So,
I've known him for 30 years.
Yeah.
He is
well, I've known him probably for not quite as long as that, but I've known him for a long time. And he's got to the fact that he generates so much joie de vivre and makes us all laugh and all the rest of it is a wonderful thing. But if you're Foreign Secretary, that has to be underpinned by the capacity to be serious as the occasion demands, but also to do the work.
All right, well, let's not concentrate on somebody who's Conservative. Let's concentrate on somebody who's Labour. You have been in the heart of Labour movement throughout your life, and you've been in the centre of it. You have been the star during the Blair era, the Brown era, even the Miliband. Now, are you alarmed the way in which Labour government is going on at the moment?
Well, I mean, we don't have a Labour government. We barely have a functioning Labour Party at the moment, and that is something that makes me incredibly sad. And I'm not sure how all this is going to play out. We're having a leadership contest. We don't know how many people will challenge Jeremy Corbyn, but I do not think that Jeremy Corbyn is somebody who can lead the Labour Party.
Did you think that before he was elected?
Yeah, I've always thought that.
You've always thought that. So now you've thought it more.
I mean, if you'd asked me, David, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, or you'd said to me 2 years ago, do you know Jeremy Corbyn's going to be the leader of the Labour Party? I would have said, you're just completely balmy.
Like people say that, that Trump might become president.
Yeah, right.
That's the way.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
But let's understand why. And let's understand why Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party. I think you have to see all politics at the moment through the prism of the elite 10% or maybe even less and 90%, and how furious 90% of people in this country are about feeling locked out of opportunity and the gilded lives of people like us who are lucky enough to live in London and all the opportunities that London offers. And we lost the referendum, and I say we because I was a passionate Remainer. I've always been a passionate European. We lost it because somehow we didn't take that seriously, didn't get out of London enough, didn't understand how neglected, how frustrated, how locked out so many people have felt. And at some level, Corbyn has tapped into that.
And you don't think he did enough at the campaign for during the referendum?
Oh, on the referendum? No, I don't think he did nearly enough. And
Well,
the evidence for that is that, 10 days before polling day, most people, or substantial numbers of people, didn't know what Labour's position was.
But do you think that it was right that he should have been automatic on the ballot paper?
Well,
It's a nice legal point, presumably.
I think, I really struggle with myself to say this,
Yes.
but I think probably in sort of natural justice, it was the right thing to do. I also think it was right to get some order in relation to the £3 join up vote for Jeremy Corbyn people, and just say it's going to cost you, you can still do it, but it's going to cost you a bit more. But I think that, I just don't think Jeremy Corbyn can lead the Labour
When
Party.
do we know the result? I mean, when will the election?
25th of September.
25th of September, okay, so
Yes.
that's another.
Just before the
All right.
Labour Party conference. But what I just wanted to, the point I wanted to finish is that, there is all this sense of alienation and disconnection out there, and we have to take it seriously. And I think that, a lot of young people voted for Jeremy Corbyn because they thought he would challenge the status quo, and that is what he's done. But challenging the status quo is not enough. It's not enough to be comfortable in your membership of a political party. The purpose of a political party is to win, is to hold, if you're in opposition, to hold the government of the day to account, but then also to go out and win power in order that you can help people change their lives in ways that they can't on their own. And that's what worries me, is that he will never be Prime Minister.
But how come there was such a short-lived support for him, even within the parliamentary colleagues of his, when he was elected? There was an overwhelming majority, and then suddenly everybody says that nobody's supporting him. Do you think he really showed that he was useless within the 9 months that he was?
I think there were three groups. I think in the parliamentary party, there were the people who were always the Corbynista MPs, and they're still largely the Corbynista MPs. Then there were the people who thought, and I think this is quite a large group, he's got such an overwhelming mandate, 60% of Labour members, that you've got to give him a chance. And that was a very fair argument. And then there were the proportion of people, about 20%, who just thought, he will never, ever be any good, and his policies and the things he believes do not belong in the mainstream of public opinion in this country.
Do you think David Miliband should have been the leader rather than Ed?
Yes.
And do you think he still has a future within the Labour Party?
I think David's now, both publicly and personally, built his life in America. He's doing extraordinary work through the International Rescue Committee. He's raised their profile, increased their funding. He's showing the most remarkable leadership. I always remember, he's a very close friend of mine, David, so I talk to him a lot, but I will always remember the interview he gave, I think it was on the Today programme, just at the beginning of Ebola, when everybody was just making sure that they didn't go anywhere near Sierra Leone or the other affected countries, and there he was, and he just, when asked, why are you taking, obviously it's risky going there, and he said it's leadership to be here. I've got 30 members of staff here.
But didn't you serve under Ed Miliband?
Yes, and I don't think Ed should have stood against his brother. I think Ed is a good man.
But having been elected, you served under him.
Because what I wanted to ensure was that I saw the Olympics through from start to finish, and then at the end of, in 2012, I stood down from the front bench because I sort of felt my job was done. And, you know, I actually became very fond of Ed, and I think that Ed will be remembered as somebody who, many of his ideas were kind of ahead of his time. I think that businesses acting with social purpose is something which he articulated in too complicated a way, but he talked about it as a sort of mainstream political proposal before it was mainstream political proposal. And he's a very good man, Ed. Obviously, the rift with David, I think, is irrevocable. But, as I say, I count myself as a friend of his, but I did not vote for him.
All right. So now you are just going to wait until the 25th of September and see how the Labour Party will evolve. And you think Jeremy Corbyn will be gone. And so who do you think will be the leader?
I don't think that's certain at all, David.
Really?
I mean, I hope that any of you who would like to sign up as registered supporters in the window between now and Wednesday will pay £25 and do so and vote for the candidate who is not Jeremy Corbyn. But I don't think there's any certainty that Jeremy Corbyn won't win.
But other than him, the other two contenders, do you think there will be just the two, Owen Smith and
Angelica?
Yes.
I think they will. I think only the two of them. Yeah.
Yes. If you were given a free choice, whom would you like? Whom would you like to see to be the leader, next leader?
Well, I would like. I think first of all, you've got to see how they both shape up in the campaign. I know Angela much better. She's been a friend of mine for years and years and years.
She's a woman.
And she's a woman, yeah. And I think actually we just have to see how, you know, if there is a campaign, how the two of them do.
And there's never been a female leader of the Labour Party.
Margaret Beckett and Harriet Harman, but they were interim leaders, you know,
Yes,
before
yes.
you say that. But no, we've never had.
Not elected.
We've never had an
Yeah.
elected leader.
Right.
And you know, so.
Do you have any ambitions to go back in there and put in your hand?
No.
What?
No.
Were you disappointed when you failed in your mayoral bid?
Very.
Very. Why were you so keen to become
Mayor
London
of London? Because I had a very, very clear idea about I'm a Londoner, and I just love the city, and I was very clear that the greatest risk for London was this sort of sense of growing inequality. And so my campaign theme was what I call One London, bringing London together again. And I had very detailed plans for building homes, making good the deficit in not in affordable housing, not just social housing, but affordable housing and rent to buy. Also, Clean Air London was another going to do very radical restructuring of central London. And what I also was going to invest heavily in was childhood inequality, because last September, when the little 4-year-old Londoners went to school for the first time, 40% of them were not ready for school. And that is the most powerful indicator of long-term inequality. Very, very hard for children who are not ready for school to make up. And so I was going to do a big...
But you're pleased, not displeased that Sadiq Khan is...
No, but I think Sadiq Khan is doing a brilliant job, actually. I think he's doing... And also I think it is great for London to have a Muslim mayor, particularly at the moment. You know, it's emblematic of the pride we have in our diversity. So I was bitterly disappointed. Why did I do it? Because of the things I very much I had a very clear programme. I lost, but what I was absolutely determined was that I was not going to be the old witch who couldn't get over it. So I have done everything I can to help and support him, and he deserves that support.
Last question from me. So what's going to happen next to you? I mean, what ambition?
What's going to happen next to me?
Are you cooking anything? Yes. Are you don't seem to want to be involved in the mainstream Labour politics. You've now given up on the mayor. There's a new mayor, not likely to do for another election for many years. You're in the House of Lords, so you can go there, but have you got any burning ambition yourself to do anything in the next couple of years?
I've got lots of burning ambition. Lots of burning ambition.
Let's have three. Let's have three.
Let's have three. Well, I would like to see public health, whole health policy into practice in cities across the world, and I have a teaching fellowship at Harvard which I will take up in the autumn at the School for Public Health, where I will be teaching students who are regarded as being the health leaders of the next generation. I also work on, also at the Harvard School for Public Health and with the Kennedy School, with African and health and finance ministers on the development of health policies. So that's, I think, my number one ambition, is to see health, health of the whole population in cities across the world. Of course, it will focus on particular cities and particular leaders that I'm lucky enough to work with. I would also, so I think that's my number one ambition. I would like to continue the work that I do in developing women and their leadership capacity, and that may be women in who are just perhaps one step below board level in FTSE companies, or it may be building on the work. I give a week every year to a charity in India that I do field volunteering with, and this year called Magic Bus is an absolutely fabulous organisation. And this year I did a week's leadership camp for 20 15-year-old girls who live in 4 different slums in Mumbai. So it's kind of, it's developing women across a very wide.
So both charitable works and also Harvard through the academic.
Yeah, and then I also developing a number of commercial roles, and I'm enjoying that. I mean, I'm enjoying that hugely.
Yes. And anyway,
I think the principle I like that I operate is to do things you believe in with people you know.
All right, let's have questions. You're correct.
Hello, thank you, Tessa, for letting me be part of your mayoral campaign. It was a real honour. I've voted Labour since 1992, and I grew up with Neil Kinnock and Militant, and I'm really worried that if Jeremy Corbyn wins, the Labour Party will split. I mean, do you see that happening, or do you think that everybody will kind of come to their senses?
Well, I think that everybody is, I think Jeremy Corbyn is being very selfish in continuing to lead the Labour Party when he's lost the confidence of members of Parliament. Members of Parliament represent their communities, 9 million people. And you can't run a mainstream political party only for its members. Members are incredibly important. But where we are now is that meetings have had to be suspended until the end of this leadership contest, because the safety of people attending meetings, the staff of MPs and the MPs cannot be guaranteed. Now, I was a Labour councillor, I was at the forefront of campaigns against Militant in the 1980s. It was never that bad. And so, I don't want to predict the Labour Party splitting. I think we've just got to we've got to campaign as hard as we can for mainstream leadership of the Labour Party and electoral leadership of the Labour Party. So I think that's the first job. And thank you for everything you did in the campaign. You're amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
Hi, Jess. Great to hear what you said so far. Talking slightly personal for myself, I find that I've lost trust in politicians. I think it's a view probably shared with an awful lot of people. And I find that quite sad, quite tragic actually. I was wondering whether your view is that something that can be changed? You know, can we get trust back one, and how would we go about that?
That's it's such an important question, and it's horrible being on the receiving end when you're doing something you believe in to the best of your ability and feel that people don't trust you. And I think, and lots of my colleagues feel the same about that, and I think that in many ways, I think trust is too high a bar, quite honestly. Politicians have always been mistrusted, and sometimes I think they deserve it, because of a degree of cynicism and so forth. A small number take the majority, and having been a member of Parliament for 23 years, I work with people that, are just exemplary. But, try saying that on most public platforms, and, people will shout at you, and, you'll get, general abuse. So I think that saying how do we get back trust, I don't think that that's a description that people will use about their relationship with politicians.
You don't think people will ever trust politicians?
Hmm?
You don't think people will genuinely
I don't think
trust?
that's the term they'll use. I think having confidence is probably an easier ambition. Some, believing in the sincerity of their endeavours is another way of expressing it. But I think that the collapse of trust, it's not actually a collapse of trust, it just is, trust is bumping along the bottom, as it pretty much always has done. To some extent you have to accept that as
Well, haven't you just brought it upon yourselves? I mean, starting right here, it's your MPs, you politicians, who brought it upon yourself, first of all, with mainly through the false accountings. What was that scandal called? Sorry?
Yes,
Expensive.
Yeah, can I just respond to that? Until I've just explained it, please don't anyone shout at me, but let me just explain what happened with that. There was a system introduced by Mrs. Thatcher, and I was not, in any way the beneficiary of this, so I can act impartially, and I was described as one of the angels of the whole thing. My expenses were very straightforward and on my website. But what happened was, when you were a newly elected MP, Mrs. Thatcher thought it was impossible to increase what MPs earned. So instead of increasing their salaries at that time, this system of MPs' allowances was introduced instead. And so MPs were told that they would have an allowance of £24,000 a year to cover the costs of running 2 homes and so forth. And so, I can remember in 1992 when people were elected at the same time as me, they were told, you just put in a bill for £2,000 a month. That's to cover your rent, the cost of your meals when you're in London, and all the additional costs of having 2 homes. Now, what then happened was that by sleight of journalistic hand, and you have to praise the journalists who were clever enough to do this, an allowance became an expense. And as you all know, expenses are a completely different thing. Expenses are what you bill for and you get refunded on an item-by-item basis. Now, what you can never get away from is that out of 650 MPs, 6 went to prison. So 1% of the population of Parliament were abusing the system and committing fraud, claiming for mortgages when they didn't have mortgages, and so forth. But that was it. You know, and I think that to attribute the collapse of trust to the fact that a very small number of people abused an allowance system is wrong. And actually, trust was low before that, it's low now, but people now talk about the expenses scandal. And, you know...
But an allowance was an allowance.
An allowance, was it? £24,000 a year?
Allowance for expenses.
No, allowance...
So I don't think it was unfair for the press or us to think, okay, I'm giving you an allowance of £24,000, but you've got to account for it. You can't just say, you know, I bought ice cream, or don't ask me what I spent the money on, give me the £2 grand a month. Now, the point is this also, is that although only 6 people went to prison, a lot more were investigated. So there's more than 1%. But I'm quite surprised that you thought
No, I was
was
dealing with your point about fraud.
I know, but the general perception of the nation, wasn't it, that there were a bunch of fiddlers? I mean, rightly or wrongly, you say only 1%.
Well, it became that, and certainly some of the things that people were.
You think it was the very
I think it was part of the story. I think, quite frankly, if you use your allowance, which is intended to support your role as a member of Parliament, and pay for it to clear your moat, is bloody stupid. And you know, and I think that is, you know, in the event that there was such a
But it was an allowance.
it would be.
You can do whatever you want.
It would be a misuse of the intended spirit of that allowance.
But Mrs. Thatcher said it was an allowance, so it is, you know, you do whatever.
Yeah, but arguably, because it's an allowance, it was.
But other than this, I mean,
spending
we'll come
whatever
back
you
to you. What other things made you feel disenfranchised from politicians?
It wasn't specifically the expenses, it was more just the general, you know, is this person standing up representing me, can I believe what this person is saying?
Is it sensitive?
So when the politician stands up, and
Who is your MP?
I'm not picking up on anybody specifically, so I think it's just a general view. I mean, obviously we've had a Tory government for quite some time. But it's when somebody stands up, is this person representing my views? Is this person actually telling the truth? Or is this bid? And I think the general perception, certainly amongst most of the people I know, is that no, it's not. You know, it's not. It's very much focused on not necessarily representing the people, representing the person. And probably a spin is probably not the truth. Then obviously there's, you know, you can't always be totally truthful in politics. I appreciate that. I think it's just more general perception.
I think let's just if you're interested, I mean, if you're not interested, tell me you're not interested. But I think this point, I mean, I've often thought about, you know, did I ever tell a lie when I was in government? And you see, if you're a minister, you're bound by the Convention of Collective Responsibility. So you go to Cabinet every week, as I did for 8 years, and you discuss things around the Cabinet table and you have your say. And then once you leave and a decision's being taken, you are, if you're going to remain in the Cabinet, bound by the collective view, the collective decision that the Cabinet took. You may have had a different view, but it may not be so diametrically opposed from your view that you're prepared to go out and say. And I always thought a very good formulation was, well, you know, there were a number of views, but on balance, the government, you know, this is the view of the government. And it might not have been my view, but it was the view that I was prepared to argue for, because it wasn't a matter of my conscience in that sense.
No, but his point is...
No, but I'm just saying, you know, this is part of why you may see people, you know, you hear them being interviewed, and if they're ministers in the government, they can't say they disagree with the
That's
Prime Minister.
precisely his point, is that some of you might be disingenuous. You don't want to leave the cabinet, you want to remain. So you say, too bad.
Yeah,
I'll
but
take
David,
the
hold on. But a lot of most of the decisions that the government takes are on-balance decisions. You know, they're not polarised choices, you know, of two extremes. They are judgments, you know, somewhere in the centre of a range of options raised by any particular issue. And you make a judgment within that. How do you reduce waiting lists in the National Health Service? Well, there are a number of options that you can apply, and you make a judgment within that limited range of options. I mean, I think that you know, if you see Gordon Brown being interviewed about his relationship with Tony Blair, and he says Tony Blair's my great friend, you think, oh, you don't believe him, and it's not true, and it wasn't true. I mean, so
I mean, that's the point. I mean, yes.
But you can't have functional government. I mean, spin, I agree, we're now in a way into a post-spin age, and I think that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
It's a good
thing.
Spin. Yeah, it's a good thing. But you've got to separate that.
But
just a second, I'm just trying to finish the point. You've got to separate that from the government having a competent way of telling people what it's doing. And, you know, that is, you know, you can say that spin, and all, but, you know, functional organisations.
The children has come out exonerating, more or less, the greatest spin doctor of modern time, Mr. Alistair Campbell. At that time, I was told very clearly that before these spin doctors, everybody had to tell the truth. There could be no lie. The minister in the ministry board had to double check. But when Alistair Campbell came along, they handled the spin. As you say, you've got to relate to the public according to the spin doctor what the facts are.
No. You are so misrepresenting, David, what I just said. You know, you've always got to be true to the facts. The point, you know, what might be called spin is, you know,
Spin is a spin.
Spin is kind of misleading people. But you see, I know Alistair Campbell very well indeed, and I also know, and he doesn't get enough credit for this, that he was absolutely rigorous about the facts. And he stayed very close to what, in briefing, to what the Prime Minister that he worked for was going to say. And, you know, you can look amazed like that, but you've got to give me, some examples, and I'll challenge you on them. You know, this is part of the problem. It's very easy to talk about, well, we don't trust politicians, they're all liars, and it's all spin. It isn't.
All right.
Thank you. Tessa, just in the context of the question, bear in mind Labour's obliteration in Scotland last year. Obviously, the inroads UKIP made into working class Labour votes, maybe taken as given by the candidate lead, and also the Brexit vote in Wales. All those were very traditionally staunch Labour constituencies, should we say. When do you see the Labour Party getting back into power, and who will be the Labour Prime Minister?
Oh, wow. I think we are in a perilous state with, and what I fear is the rise of English nationalism. I mean, that's what I really fear. And I think that, you know, you could well get a kind of splintering of right-wing Tory vote with right-wing Labour vote in pursuit of exactly, you know, people who feel excluded. And I think I think that that's a great risk, and you then get the UKIP insurgency, and it kind of comes from both ends. So there are so many imponderables to when I think Labour will get back into power. I think it would be very hard for us to win in 2020 as things stand. But on the other hand, we could be here in 3 years' time with Labour 5 points ahead in the polls, and somebody, I wouldn't put a name to who it might be, somebody as the then to be leader of the Labour Party, and we'd wonder why we were so despondent and lacked so much faith in Labour's resilience. But where we, I think it's important to be realistic. And you would think I was implausible if I said, Labour's going to win in 2020. It'd be very, very hard, and I think impossible with Jeremy Corbyn as leader.
I think more because half of Scotland is completely gone, completely, and Wales is very much like very difficult. I pity your party. You might think about tone coat, joining the Conservative Party, right?
I don't think so.
Yes, that's the gentleman there, then the lady there, and then this lady here.
Hi, Tessa.
Hi.
As a resident of Stratford, I thank you for our wonderful park
Good.
and all our infrastructure and everything, and all the changes happening. I wanted to ask you about 2010. And obviously, apart from what must have been general sadness about not being a government anymore, but for you personally, having to hand over that portfolio, how difficult was that? How did you feel having to? Were you watching from the sidelines? How did you feel for the following 2 years as shadow? How did you feel you were able to contribute? How difficult was it?
Well, actually, very easily. And I always felt it was important that the Olympics, because it was, an Olympiad, as it's called, is 7 years long, it was obviously going to go over an election, that it was important to run the Olympics on a cross-party basis, and that's what I did. And so when the new government was elected, they immediately asked me to join the Olympic board, and so I still had an executive role in relation to the Olympics on the Olympic board, and was very close to and regularly met with Hugh Robertson, who was the Olympics Minister, and Jeremy Hunt, who was the Secretary of State. And I was obviously very close to Seb Coe, and part of there was a sort of leadership group of the Olympics that was the leadership group from start to finish, and somehow the election didn't disrupt that. And so I felt very lucky, and lots of people said to me, actually, going back to what we were saying about Boris at the beginning, oh, don't you feel so gutted that Boris is getting all the credit? And I think that one of the corruptions of politics is to see success as a sort of zero-sum game. And the Olympics were just amazing. And, what they did for the country, what they did for the city, how we were then. And a very senior minister in the new government said to me, I'm very worried that Seb Coe and Paul Dighton, who was the CEO of the Olympics, and people like you are going to get all the credit, and I'm just going to be the minister for bad news. And I said, don't worry about it, it's going to work as we've all intended, and there will be lots of credit to go around. But it really made me think again about the bad habits of when I was in government, where it was sort of thought that if somebody was up, then you must be down, and so the great impulse was to pull down the person who was up. And it was Harry Truman who said, it's remarkable what a group of people could do together if they don't mind who gets the credit. And that's really how I've tried to operate. And I think it's a much healthier way. And I think that if we did that more in our politics would be more self-confident and more open.
More cross-party.
And more cross-party. And, I'm because I've never been a tribal politician. I think that there are, never deny that there are differences between parties, but always remember that a lot of the big judgments are judgments on balance, and that if you want to see change through in the long term, it's important to build a cross-party alliance.
But I mean, we all know you did a lot, and I think that was recognised by your demo in 2012, so that speaks for itself. And I'm afraid, one or two people always get all the credit, rightly or wrongly, but there it is. Okay, there. At the back, and then this lady.
Hi, I'm interested when you live in a community and you have a community which has great inequality, which I think a lot of communities in London do, and I know in Southampton Road we do, and you launch a programme where we're involved heavily with Sure Start, which would try to balance out some of that inequality for children as they grow up. I'm interested in how it feels personally for you to see programmes like that now being shut down.
Oh, I think it's absolutely heartbreaking. And when I think about, I think it is heartbreaking. I think I think that we know so much now, more now, about how to prevent inequality in childhood. And there's a very short distance between all the evidence telling us what to do and being able to do it. So why don't we do it? And it's one of the things, when I go to Harlem and work with these potential city leaders, that I'm really going to focus on. And I've called my program, Why Do We Know So Much and Do So Little? And what is it that impedes the implementation of all the best evidence? And allows us to go on wringing our hands about childhood inequality.
Well, why was this thing closed down?
Well, in Hampshire we had 83, and the funds come from county council.
So lack of funding.
Yeah, well, county council made the decision about what to do with their funding from central government. So we went from 83 to 54, and we're now about to go to 11 by Christmas. And for me personally, knowing exactly the vital work they do, and saving money, and saving lives, and changing aspirations of families,
Yeah.
it seems completely nonsensical.
I know, it is. Yeah, it is.
There's no positive to come from it. It doesn't even save money.
And that's because of government cuts.
Because the county council where I live have the decision to make about how to spend their funding,
Yeah.
and they would rather fund super speed, broadband, beach huts, and trust towers, which
I didn't hear which council it is.
Hampshire.
Oh, right, yes, yeah.
Well, they would spend the money on building beach huts.
Well, they've just funded beach hut, I think regeneration of a tower.
I think the council ought to be exposed.
Well, I've been trying hard.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating when there is the funding there, and they now have to pay back, claw back to central
I think
government.
you should write to Lady Jowell and let her, have a go. It's very important. Sorry, one more letter.
Thank you very
Quickly, two more questions. Go on.
Thank you very much for your kind answer. My question is about Brexit. Do you think we could walk back from the outcome? Do you think it's going to happen? What would be the best scenario given the situation now?
I think it's very hard indeed to, people have voted, and, I can't be objective about this. People voted, I think, not because of anything intrinsically about Europe, but people voted because they wanted to stick on to politicians. And so the Brexit vote became a kind of receptacle for everything that so many people were angry about. And in many cases, justifiably angry. The fear of migration, the kind of insufficiency of public services arising from austerity, just this sense of being locked out of opportunity. And I sort of see it as, people seeing the twinkling lights of London from a long distance and feeling there's no place for me there. And I think that that's what people...
Let me ask you this. If 17 million had voted for Remain and 16 voted for Brexit and we lost, would you have had any sympathy to the other 16 who were voting, who were the angry votes that you just mentioned?
Absolutely, because I think that just as I think the Brexit vote has got to respect the size of the Remain vote, you know, we are a profoundly divided country, separated by a 1 million majority for Brexit.
That's a lot.
Hmm?
That's a lot. A million people.
Well,
we've got 200 here. A lot.
it's, you know,
You either abide by the rule or you don't,
no,
right?
and David, I'm not saying you don't abide by the rule. I'm just trying to give you a rather more considered answer to that.
Like you
Is
get
that-
4 million votes,
No,
one seat.
No, let's not get into reform of the voting system. Let's talk
Yeah, but those
about.
are numbers.
Let's answer the question about whether there's any way back. The answer is that people have voted, and you know
So no.
as Theresa May has said, Brexit means Brexit, but that also means getting the very best deal for the UK economy, and what we can get, what Europe will agree to, is completely unknown at the moment. It is critical we continue to have access to the single market. It is critical that people in this country continue to enjoy the benefits that were implemented from Europe, that have been, you know, given people statutory holiday, longer maternity pay, basis of our equality legislation. So, you know, it is absolutely vital that we secure the least damaging deal.
Least damaging.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we don't know. We don't know.
No, we don't. No, we don't. We
China
don't.
has said wonderful. We'll now talk to China. You know, the Dominion, British Dominion, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Britain couldn't buy directly.
Yeah, but hold on. The Canadians are tearing their hair out at the frustration that they have in trying to negotiate a free trade agreement. So I proceed very carefully in saying, well, let's have an arrangement like
Canada
has,
has
or Norway has. They're much smaller countries, much smaller economies. Norway is a very rich country in oil and gas, and has a population of 5 million.
All right, last question. Who was the lady? Was it you? No? Last question. Okay, let's have the last question.
My question is that Tony Blair was elected on a trust meeting.
Was elected on
trust. His whole pitch was trust me. And then we trusted him, and he took us to war, an illegal war, and it set every Muslim against every Christian. And it's upset the whole balance of peace existing. Should he be indicted as a Muslim?
No, certainly not. And I think it's the Chilcot report was rigorous. I think that before, I know how strongly the Stop the War campaign and so forth have always felt about this. I think three things. The Chilcot report makes no suggestion that Tony Blair lied, makes no suggestion that the cabinet was misled, and does not suggest that there was any priority, that there was any abuse of intelligence, willful abuse of intelligence, nor that there was a sort of prior and undisclosed deal with the Americans, nor that willfully our forces deployed in Iraq were deprived of essential equipment. All the equipment that the military, the Department of the MOD asked for was provided. They probably didn't ask for enough, but what they asked for was provided, what was provided for. So the fact is that we agreed to join the coalition in pursuit of 2 UN resolutions because the intelligence told us that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction.
That's a long...
And had chemical and biological agents. He had used, you know, all the circumstantial evidence bears out. Tariq Aziz, his foreign minister, said we used chemical agent against the Persians and the Jews. He used chemical agent against mustard gas against the Kurds in Halabja. I mean, the idea that he had used, you know, an Australian weapons inspector said they use chemical agents. He uses, Saddam uses chemical agent as a form of crowd control. So he clearly had chemical and biological agent. He clearly had the means to distribute them. I had, like every member of the cabinet, a security briefing. And recently, well, a few years ago when I moved house, I found my notes, and there was no question of conditionality or, you know, on balance, we believe. Everything was absolutely clear. He has, we believe it has this capability, you know, and so forth. And
capability, but not mass destruction.
Oh, no. That he had enough anthrax to destroy every major city.
Well, he didn't.
Well, no, I know he didn't. Well, not that was found, did it? But that was not what the intelligence and security services said, because the intelligence source was wrong.
All right, well, look, we've never gone beyond, but we have gone beyond because it's so passionate, so difficult, so interesting, so convoluted, and I'm extremely grateful. Very convoluted. And with regard to Brexit, I just find it incredible that the government, the Cameron government, did absolutely nothing in preparation for Brexit. I mean, that is a huge irresponsibility on their part. But anyway, that's neither here nor that's my incumbents. But look, listen, Tessa, we put you in very difficult questions to you, and you've been very frank with us, and I'm extremely grateful. And this is what makes Britain a wonderful country, is that you have this great diversity and disagreement, but over civilization, so that we use words in disagreeing with each other rather than hitting people in the face. And I want to thank you, and I want you, please join me to thank Tessa Jowell for coming today.
Being sufficiently interested to come and spend an hour and a half. It's an hour, no, well, not quite.
No,
a bit over an hour. Thank you very, very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.